E te iwi tēnā katoa koutou, tēnā tātou I roto I tēnei pō. Kia ora everybody, Che Wilson here from Te Pai Pai Waho, and great to be here. It's the end of the session on Tangihanga, so it is Kaupapa number 8, where I'll be doing a summary of some key things that came out of the last 8 sessions focused in on Tangihanga. Mindful that I'm a little bit late, so thank you for your patience. Just got back from Auckland, where I've been at a kaupapa o Te Oati, hosted at the Carl Morgan House. Nā reira, kei te tuakana, Luke, koutou ko tō wānau, tēnei kāmi atu tēnā koutou. Kia ora tātou. So getting straight into it, and I'll do a karakia and we'll go from there. Karanga kia rangi nui atu o nei, karanga kia papea tako toake nei. Te putanga o te kōrero, te putanga o te wānanga, ka puta ki wā o ki te wai au, ki te ao marama. E kei o mai te manawa ora. Manawa ora ki te pua, manawa ora ki tauita. Manawa ora ka puta ki wā o ki te wai au, ki te ao marama. Turuturu au I te waka maua kia tīna, ui e, tāiki e. Tāiki e kia tātou. Me te me I kau atu kia tātou I roto I tēnei pō. As I said, just got back from Auckland and a little bit late tonight, but I thought instead of waiting till next week, better to be late than hold out for the last session for a week later. So, as I said, kia ora Pete. Tonight's kaupapa is a summary of Tangihanga, and there's a couple of points that I've jotted down so that we can work through. And I think the first point to note is that with Tangihanga, it's a tangi, and you are supposed to cry. You are supposed to cry. The more you cry a river, the better. And you should never apologize for crying. This whole notion of apologizing for crying is a foreign idea, whereas it's a tangi, you've lost somebody, so cry a river. Pretty straightforward, really. The other point to note is, as I think about some of the things I've covered over the last 8 weeks, is decision-making at a tangi is really essential. And so making a decision as a family before somebody even passes, when the hard decisions need to be made. Otherwise, the family might have fights amongst themselves, which is just a bloody hoha for the marae. And then the marae often have to become the adjudicator. And that's just not helpful. And so as a family, sort out the decision-making, and then note that when you get to the marae, there may be some things you have to give up because the tikanga of the marae still has to be maintained. If you don't like the tikanga of the marae, then I suppose don't go to the marae, which makes it hard, but it's important that you need to know that this whole idea of, it's their personal wishes and all of that, that's pākehā. That's not Māori. And even though it happens at many marae, just don't mix them up. Hui mate, I never really hear that south of the Bombay Hills. It's more of a northern thing. And kia ora, Luke. Yeah, so hui mate, I don't usually hear that, but I've noticed it starting to creep in. But yeah, traditionally I only ever heard that phrase in the north, and the difference is it's a hui for mate, and a tangihanga, technically as I know it, is the funeral day, or from closing the coffin through to burial. That's the tangihanga. And the word that has only been revived at home, but our olds have always said it, is uhunga, but not every tribe uses that term. Carrying on with these other kaupapa, so decision making is essential. Then there's this whole thing around working with the officials, and you have to make sure that the decisions you're making, you're keeping the hau kāinga ready and informed, just in case, especially if an autopsy is required. All of those things take time. Another point to note is the tono tū pāpaku. There's an assumption just because there is a tono that there has to be an agreement. Whereas the most important thing about the tono is that the tono is laid down to honour the person and to acknowledge whakapapa and ensure that relationships are maintained. It may come across aggressive, but sometimes that's just part of the pageantry of the tono and part of the hype of the tono. The other point about a tono is that sometimes that tono can stay open right up until the partner passes. And I know of one in my own family where my uncle's always said to my uncle, if ever he ends up with another woman, then they'll come and dig their cousin up. And before the last one passed away, he said to me, you make sure you keep an eye on your uncle, because if he finds him a new woman, and he's in his 90s now, who knows, he could still find someone, that if he found someone, my job is to go and dig my auntie up. But the most important point around a tono is that a tono is to acknowledge relationships. So that's the tono. A couple of other things. Working at the tangi. Sometimes it's an elimination process. You just got to work it out. Because in an ideal world, when there are heaps of numbers, then yes, the pani don't need to work. The grieving family, the immediate family don't need to work. But if you're low on numbers, the most important thing is to look after your manuhiri. And so as whānau pani, you might have to work. In addition to that, most marae today struggle to fill their paipai, struggle to fill their kitchens. And it's only when it's a big wig that the marae is often full. So you've got to work through all those processes to identify. You might have to say to just one or two people in the family, your job is to stay next to mum or dad or whoever, stay next to the body. The rest of us will work. You've just got to work that out yourselves. Work with the marae to ensure that the mana of the marae, and therefore the mana of the person lying in state, the tūpapaku, are upheld. Who pays for everything? It's pretty straightforward. These days, it's usually the family that pay for everything, even when there's a tono. And even though things will be run differently for each marae, the most important thing is that whoever's making the decisions, whoever's gathering the koha, works in with the marae. Because sometimes the marae will gather the koha, or sometimes the koha will be given to the family, and then they work it out at the end. You've just got to make it work and see what works for you at your marae. Just reading something here. Kauhau. The last night is a time where people get to remember, and as they remember, you share stories. It's a time to cry, it's a time to laugh, it's a time to sing. And in some tribes, the family are allowed to talk. Other tribes, the family aren't. Some tribes, they leave it till the end for the family to be the last speakers. It's all different. Where I come from, we're not allowed to talk. Not allowed to talk until we come back from the urupa. And each area to their own, and you just have to work that out. And if you've never been back to your marae, my encouragement, even though I know that some of our own families can be mean and harsh, and you can't always get through, my encouragement is that you actually go back before the person passes. Next point, what happens to the ashes if there's a cremation? Usually, I try and encourage people to bury the ashes as soon as possible, because that helps you with the grieving process. Because if you keep them too long, even though you may say it's helping you, ka tīmata te wakamomori. Ka wakamomori atu I tō mate, and aua, it becomes really hard for you to then navigate and work through both the grieving process of the tangihanga and then how to let go. The other point about interring ashes, please don't throw them in the moana or in the river. And even though people think that's really lovely, somebody's got to get a kai from there. And the fish might be eating your cousin or your uncle or your mother's ashes, and then we eat that fish. So it's that simple, really. So find a place where things are respected, the place is respected to inter the ashes. And, some will listen to this, some won't, but just be mindful that the importance of maintaining the separation of tapu and noa is essential. Alcohol at the urupa. You see a whole heap of people videoing and showing off, getting pissed at the urupa. Just because heaps of people do it today doesn't necessarily mean it's right. Grieving is a real thing, and I get that, granted. However, to go to urupa, have kai, have a drink, have a party, you're actually not allowing yourself to let that person go. And you need to let them go. You still visit, but when you get to a certain state, you start to go back and linger in the paw. And you've got to have ways to visit, say your hello, have your talk, and then leave. But when you start taking kai, you aren't maintaining any semblance of separation, and therefore you're entering in and out of tapu and noa. You are breaching those things which are established to ensure that we maintain a well life rather than a life that lingers in the paw of depression, and especially if you start to mix things up. So just want to note that, because it's real that people grieve, but you've got to find ways to let that pain out, because alcohol only numbs it, doesn't let it fully out. And the process is, if you go through a full tangi process and it's explained through that whole process, having the singing, sad songs, miserable songs, and then going through to haka and neri, and then having the karanga there, those are all different vibrations that can help you release and then heal. The most important thing as we navigate the tangihanga space, and as I wrap up for tonight, is love. Let your love be expressed during a tangi. Allow yourself to be loved rather than being stubborn during a tangi. And show your love to the person who's passed by crying a river, because it's the tangi that ensures that you can release and let go. Ka tiake. Big day today. So just a big mihi to the Carr Morgan family. Beautiful evening tonight. Nō reira, koutou katoa. I've received some really cool feedback, and I've really appreciated the questions that have come my way. Hopefully these sessions have helped you. Deliberately haven't focused just in my own tribe, but experiences I've seen and had around the country so that it can help you help us. Because we're all on a journey. Tēnei kāmi atu tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou. Kia o kairi ake ngā kupu ki te tā uu nui o rangi nui e tūnei. E rongo o kairi ake kirunga ai. Turuturo au iti o ka maua kia tīna, hui e, tai kia kia tātou, pō mārire. I'll be thinking of a next kaupapa for next week. Kia ora tātou.